I stared at my phone screen, reading my father Frank's brutal text message for the third time. "Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties." The words hit like ice water in my veins. I typed back one word, understood. Without hesitation, I opened my banking app and removed my name from the $1.2 million loan guaranteeing my family's restaurant empire. 24 hours later, my phone exploded with 38 missed calls and one panicked message from accountant Gerald Morrison. "Emergency. The loan defaults tomorrow without your signature." 3 years ago feels like a lifetime now, but I remember that autumn afternoon when Dad Frank sat me down at my kitchen table with his big dreams spread across financial documents. He painted a beautiful picture of Romano's Italian kitchen, our family restaurant chain that would span across Connecticut. His eyes sparkled with entrepreneurial fire as he described locations in Hartford, New Haven, and Stamford, each one serving authentic recipes passed down from his grandmother. I was the only family member with a perfect credit score of 810, thanks to my marketing consulting firm that had been thriving for 5 years. My income was steady. My debt-to-income ratio was excellent, and banks loved me. Frank knew this when he asked me to co-sign the massive Small Business Administration loan. "Janine, you're the responsible one," he said, placing his weathered hand over mine. "Your signature opens doors that stay locked for the rest of us. But don't worry, sweetheart. You'll never be responsible for payments. This is just a formality to get better interest rates." The promise felt genuine. My family had always treated me as the reliable daughter, the one who made sensible decisions and helped others succeed. Co-signing seemed like a natural extension of my supportive role. I signed those documents with complete trust, watching Frank's face light up with gratitude. The restaurant business exploded beyond anyone's expectations. Romano's Italian kitchen became the talk of each city where we opened. Food critics raved about our homemade pasta and wood-fired pizzas. Lines formed around blocks during weekend dinner rushes. Local newspapers featured us in business success stories. Frank appeared on morning television shows discussing his entrepreneurial journey and family recipes. I attended every celebration, every grand opening, every anniversary party. My arms always carried expensive bottles of Chianti or Barolo gifts that cost me hundreds of dollars per bottle. I never questioned why profit sharing never materialized in my bank account despite being the loan guarantor who made everything possible. My role seemed to be financial enabler and grateful audience member. Family gatherings buzzed with exciting updates about expansion plans, new equipment purchases, and rising revenue numbers. Tyler, my younger brother, managed the Hartford location with swagger that suggested he owned the place. Amanda, my sister, handled marketing across all 3 locations, posting glossy social media content that made our restaurants look like culinary destinations. But something nagged at me during those celebrations. Important business decisions happened in conversations that stopped when I approached. Financial discussions occurred in hushed tones between Frank Tyler and Amanda, while I remained excluded despite my massive financial liability. When I asked about profit distributions or business expenses, Frank would wave dismissively and say, "Don't worry about business details, sweetheart. You just keep doing your consulting work." My banking statements started showing concerning patterns. The loan money wasn't just funding restaurant operations. Large withdrawals appeared with vague descriptions that didn't match typical business expenses. Equipment purchases seemed inflated beyond reasonable market prices. Frank had somehow obtained a vacation home in Cape Cod and luxury vehicles, all appearing on credit reports linked to my loan guarantees. The revelation struck me like lightning during a routine credit monitoring check. Frank had used my pristine credit rating to secure additional financing for personal luxuries, while promising me the loan was strictly for business purposes. The Cape Cod house sat in his name, but the mortgage carried my signature as guarantor. 3 brand new vehicles filled the family driveways, each one financed through credit lines attached to my loan agreements. I sat in my home office that night, surrounded by financial documents and bank statements, realizing how completely I had been manipulated. My perfect credit had become Frank's personal ATM funding, not just our family's restaurant dream, but his individual lifestyle upgrades. The restaurants were successful, but their profits were flowing toward Frank's private enjoyments rather than loan payments or business reinvestment. The weight of financial exposure settled on my shoulders like a crushing burden. I wasn't just a supportive family member helping with a business venture. I was an unwilling financier for Frank's spending spree, holding responsibility for debts I never intended to approve. My signature had unlocked millions of dollars in credit that Frank treated as his personal funds. Sleep became impossible that night as I calculated the true scope of my financial vulnerability. Every luxury purchase Frank made increased my liability. Every missed payment would damage my credit score. Every default would destroy my financial future. The family I had trusted with my economic security had transformed me into their unknowing benefactor, expecting eternal gratitude for the privilege of funding their comfortable lifestyle. Growing up as the eldest child in the Romano family meant carrying expectations that felt heavier with each passing year. My earliest memories include working small jobs to contribute to household expenses, while Tyler and Amanda enjoyed typical teenage freedoms. At 16, I juggled 2 part-time positions after school, stocking shelves at Morrison's grocery store and cleaning offices downtown just to afford Tyler's football equipment for his junior varsity team. Mom Linda would praise my work ethic in front of neighbors, calling me her little entrepreneur and future business leader. But those compliments came with unspoken obligations that grew more demanding over time. When Tyler needed cleats, shoulder pads, or camp registration fees, everyone looked at Janine. When Amanda wanted piano lessons or dance classes, Janine found the money. When household appliances broke down, Janine's paychecks covered replacements. College years intensified this pattern. While my dormitory friends enjoyed typical student experiences like spring break trips and weekend parties, I worked in the campus library, tutored struggling students, and sent monthly checks home to Connecticut. My diet consisted primarily of ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, because every dollar beyond basic survival went toward family support. I told myself this sacrifice was temporary, that success in my marketing degree would eventually reward everyone's patience. After graduation, my consulting firm's rapid growth should have meant financial freedom for me personally. Instead, family requests multiplied with my income level. Tyler needed an apartment lease cosigner when his credit application failed. Amanda required vehicle loan assistance when her first car purchase attempt got rejected. Frank and Linda asked for mortgage refinancing help when interest rates dropped, using my excellent credit to secure better terms they couldn't qualify for alone. Each request arrived with emotional manipulation disguised as family love. Linda would call crying about stress and financial pressure. Frank would explain how my help was temporary assistance that would benefit everyone long-term. Tyler and Amanda would promise to pay me back someday, while never establishing concrete repayment schedules. My attempts to set boundaries were met with accusations of selfishness and reminders of family loyalty obligations. Birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, and graduation ceremonies became showcases for my generosity rather than genuine celebrations of relationships. I arrived carrying expensive gifts that stretched my budget, wine collections that impressed relatives, and restaurant bills that covered entire extended family dinners. Everyone praised my success and generosity, but those compliments felt hollow when accompanied by hints about upcoming financial needs. The psychological toll was exhausting. I existed as the family's financial safety net while being excluded from major decisions that affected everyone's future. Tyler's career choices, Amanda's educational plans, and Frank's business ideas were discussed and decided without my input, even when my financial support made those choices possible. I was valued for my earning capacity, but dismissed when my opinions about spending priorities conflicted with family preferences. Extended family gatherings reinforced these dynamics. Uncle Pete and Aunt Carol Frank's siblings would joke about my golden touch with money, while sharing stories about how my contributions had helped their own children through various challenges. Cousin Danny, who managed one of our restaurant locations, would thank me publicly for making his job possible, while privately expecting me to cover shortfalls in his operational budget. The family reunion I was now banned from represented the culmination of this exploitation. Through social media posts and overheard phone conversations, I pieced together the truth about this celebration. The reunion wasn't just a family gathering. It was a party commemorating the expansion of Romano's Italian kitchen to Boston, our fourth location and biggest investment yet. This expansion was funded entirely through credit lines and loan guarantees that bore my signature and tied to my credit rating. Frank had secured construction loans, equipment financing, and operational credit using my financial standing as collateral. The Boston location would cost nearly $2 million to open, money that would flow through accounts I guaranteed but had no control over. My exclusion from this celebration revealed the family's true perception of my role. I was valuable as a financial resource, but unwelcome as an equal participant in the success my credit had created. Frank, Tyler, Amanda, and extended family members would toast the expansion I had made possible while celebrating my absence from their achievement. The cruelty of this situation crystallized into pure clarity. 24 years of being the perfect daughter, the responsible sister, the reliable family member had earned me a lifetime of financial obligation without respect, recognition, or inclusion. I had purchased their dreams with my credit and received exile as my reward. Sitting in my apartment that evening, surrounded by bills and bank statements that reflected years of family financial support, I realized the perfect daughter syndrome had transformed me into the perfect victim. My family had systematically trained me to provide financial assistance while accepting emotional crumbs in return. My value existed in my signature on loan documents, not in my presence at family celebrations. The text message banning me from the reunion was actually a liberation notice, though Frank didn't intend it that way. For the first time in my adult life, I could see the financial relationship clearly. I was funding their lifestyle while being treated as an inconvenient obligation. The perfect daughter had finally grown tired of perfection that served everyone except herself. Gerald Morrison's voice cracked with desperation when my phone finally rang at 7:30 in the morning, interrupting my coffee and the peaceful silence I had enjoyed since removing my name from the loan documents. His usually calm professional demeanor had dissolved into panic-stricken babbling that immediately put me on high alert. "Janine, thank God you answered. We have a catastrophic situation developing, and I need your immediate attention. The Small Business Administration loan requires your signature for renewal, and the deadline is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Without your authorization, the entire restaurant chain faces immediate foreclosure proceedings affecting 47 employees across 3 locations." Gerald had been Frank's accountant for nearly 8 years, handling everything from tax preparations to financial planning for the restaurant expansion. His office in downtown Hartford was lined with certificates and awards that established his credibility in small business financial management. I had met him dozens of times during family business discussions, though he had always directed his attention toward Frank rather than acknowledging my role as loan guarantor. "Gerald, I need you to explain something to me," I said, settling into my desk chair with notebook and pen ready. "How did Frank miss loan renewal deadlines? Isn't this exactly the kind of responsibility that professional financial management prevents?" The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Gerald cleared his throat and began speaking in measured tones that suggested he was choosing words very carefully. "Janine Frank hasn't made a single loan payment in 8 months. He assumed you would automatically handle renewals like you had handled the original loan approval. I warned him repeatedly about this financial dependency, but he told me, Janine always comes through for family." My hand froze above the notebook as the implications hit me. 8 months of missed payments meant Frank had been operating the restaurants on borrowed time while using loan money for other purposes. The successful business I had been celebrating was actually a house of cards built on deferred obligations and my unwitting financial backing. "Gerald, I need complete transparency about our financial exposure. What else am I responsible for beyond the original $1.2 million loan?" Another long pause preceded Gerald's response, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background as he apparently gathered documents to support his coming revelations. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of professional guilt and ethical conflict. "The loan covers restaurant operations, but it also covers Frank's personal debts that have accumulated over the past 2 years. Credit card balances totaling $87,000. The vacation home mortgage in Cape Cod at $325,000. Amanda's wedding expenses at $41,000. Tyler's graduate school tuition at $63,000. All of these debts carry your signature as guarantor." I stood up from my desk, pacing around my apartment as the scope of financial manipulation became clear. Frank had used my perfect credit rating as a personal bank funding family luxuries and individual expenses, while disguising them as business-related costs. My signature had unlocked a treasure chest that Frank treated as his personal inheritance. "Gerald, how is this legal? I never signed documents for personal expenses. I specifically signed for restaurant business loans." "Janine, that brings me to the second issue we need to discuss immediately." Gerald's voice dropped to nearly a whisper, as if he was concerned about being overheard. "Frank forged your signature on a $300,000 equipment loan 6 months ago, and that loan is also in default. He used equipment purchases as justification, but the money funded the Boston location's down payment and his personal investment portfolio." The revelation struck me like physical violence. Frank had committed identity fraud using my name and credit to secure additional financing without my knowledge or consent. The equipment loan was completely fraudulent, designed to extract more money from my credit rating while keeping me ignorant of the growing liability. "I need copies of every document bearing my signature, Gerald. Email them to me within the next 2 hours. And I need a complete accounting of every debt loan credit line and financial obligation connected to my name through Frank's businesses or personal accounts." "Janine, I understand your anger, but we need to focus on tomorrow's deadline. Without your signature, 47 people lose their jobs. The restaurants generate enough revenue to support loan payments if we can restructure the terms. Your family's financial future depends on your cooperation." Gerald's attempt to manipulate me through guilt about employee welfare revealed how deeply the family's exploitation had spread. Even their professional advisors expected me to sacrifice my financial security to protect others from consequences of Frank's irresponsible decisions. The accountant was trying to use emotional blackmail to secure my continued participation in fraudulent financial schemes. Gerald, I need you to understand something very clearly. Frank's financial problems are not my responsibility to solve. His fraudulent use of my credit is not my obligation to enable. The employees deserve honesty about their employer's criminal behavior, not continued participation in deceptive practices that will eventually collapse anyway. Janine, please consider the broader implications. Frank made mistakes, but destroying the business hurts innocent people who depend on their restaurant jobs. Your family relationships will never recover from this decision. Sometimes forgiveness serves everyone's best interests better than punishment. Gerald's professional consultation had transformed into family therapy, complete with suggestions about forgiveness and relationship preservation. His role had evolved from financial advisor to enabler of Frank's fraudulent behavior, prioritizing business continuity over legal and ethical obligations. The accountant was asking me to continue funding criminal activity in the name of family harmony. I realized in that moment that Gerald had been complicit in Frank's deception for years, providing professional legitimacy to fraudulent financial practices while expecting me to remain ignorant of my exploitation. The panic in his voice wasn't just about loan defaults. It was about potential criminal exposure for his role in facilitating identity fraud and financial manipulation. Gerald, I want you to fax me every document related to my financial involvement with Frank's businesses by noon today. After that, direct all communication through my attorney. And Gerald, you should probably consult your own legal counsel about your role in facilitating fraudulent loan applications. The phone call ended in silence, but Gerald's confession had provided the clarity I needed to understand the true scope of my family's betrayal and the criminal nature of their financial exploitation. Within 3 hours of my conversation with Gerald, my phone began ringing with the coordinated precision of a political campaign. Each family member had apparently been assigned specific emotional tactics designed to break down my resolve and force my return to financial servitude. The manipulation felt almost professionally orchestrated, as if they had studied psychology textbooks on guilt, shame, and family loyalty. Linda called first, her voice choked with tears that sounded genuine but felt calculated. Janine, sweetheart, I don't understand what's happening. Your father is pacing around the house like a wild animal saying we're going to lose everything because of some misunderstanding about loan papers. I haven't slept since yesterday. My blood pressure medication isn't working anymore. The doctor says stress could put me in the hospital. Mom had always been the family's emotional manipulator, using health concerns and tears to control behavior and extract sympathy. Her phone call followed the same pattern I remembered from childhood, present herself as the innocent victim of circumstances beyond her control, then request rescue from her responsible daughter. The house we've lived in for 28 years might be foreclosed. All the memories of your childhood gone forever. Your father keeps talking about bankruptcy and losing his business reputation. I don't know how I'll face our neighbors if we lose the restaurant that everyone is so proud of. People will think we're failures. Linda's manipulation focused on shame, legacy, and emotional attachment to material possessions. She wanted me to feel responsible for protecting family pride and preserving childhood memories through continued financial sacrifice. The strategy was designed to make my decision feel selfish and destructive rather than protective and appropriate. Amanda called next, her approach more aggressive and directly accusatory. Janine, what are you trying to prove by destroying our family business? Do you realize how many people you're hurting with this power trip? My children ask why Aunt Janine doesn't love them anymore. How do I explain that their college funds are disappearing because you want to punish Dad for some imaginary slight? My sister had chosen to focus on innocent third parties, particularly her children, to create maximum guilt about collateral damage from my financial independence. Her strategy suggested that protecting myself from fraud was actually child abuse, that refusing to enable criminal behavior was selfish cruelty toward innocent family members. Tyler is talking about dropping out of graduate school because he can't afford tuition without the restaurant profits. His dreams of becoming an architectural engineer are ending because you won't sign some paperwork. Is this the legacy you want, destroying your brother's future over hurt feelings? Tyler's phone call arrived with perfect timing, confirming the coordinated nature of their campaign. His approach combined self-pity with accusations of emotional immaturity, suggesting that financial fraud was merely hurt feelings that mature adults should overlook for the greater good. Janine, I know Dad can be difficult sometimes, but family loyalty means supporting each other through problems, not abandoning ship when things get complicated. You're acting like a spoiled child who didn't get invited to a birthday party. Grow up and think about people other than yourself. Uncle Pete's call represented the extended family's perspective, complete with threats disguised as concerns about legal and social consequences. Janine, I've been talking to my attorney about family financial obligations and abandonment of contractual duties. You could face lawsuits for breach of fiduciary responsibility and intentional economic harm. Is proving a point worth destroying your own legal standing? The threat of legal action revealed how far the family was willing to go to maintain their exploitation. Uncle Pete was essentially threatening to sue me for refusing to continue funding Frank's criminal behavior, suggesting that stopping financial abuse was itself a form of legal violation that could result in my prosecution. Your grandmother would be ashamed of how you're treating your family. She believed in forgiveness and sacrifice for people you love. This stubborn pride isn't the Romano way. We stick together through difficulties even when we disagree about methods. Religious and ancestral guilt represented another layer of psychological manipulation, invoking dead relatives and family traditions to shame me into continued compliance. Uncle Pete was suggesting that protecting myself from fraud violated sacred family values that previous generations had established through their sacrificial examples. Frank finally called, but his approach differed dramatically from the emotional manipulation tactics employed by other family members. His voice carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to getting his way through intimidation and dismissal of opposition. Janine, stop being selfish and remember your family obligations. You signed those loan documents because you understood the importance of family business success. Now you're destroying everything we've built together because you feel left out of a simple family gathering. This revenge fantasy needs to end immediately. Frank's complete lack of apology or acknowledgement of wrongdoing revealed his true perspective on our relationship. He viewed my financial exploitation as appropriate family obligation, my exclusion from decision-making as natural, and my resistance to continued abuse as immature revenge-seeking. Sign the renewal papers, and we can discuss your concerns about feeling included in business decisions. But understand that running restaurants requires experience you don't have. Your role is financial support, not operational management. Stay in your lane and everything works smoothly. The restaurant employees began calling, too, adding another dimension to the manipulation campaign. Sally Henderson, a single mother who worked as a server in the Hartford location, called crying about losing her health insurance and car payments if the restaurants closed. Tommy Rodriguez, a line cook supporting his elderly parents, begged me to reconsider because finding another job with similar pay would take months. These calls were the most painful because the employees were genuinely innocent victims of Frank's financial irresponsibility. Their appeals carried real emotional weight because their suffering wasn't manufactured or manipulative like the family's campaign. These were honest people facing genuine hardship because of crimes they had no knowledge of or participation in. But during Amanda's third call that evening, my phone's speaker malfunctioned and activated an accidentally forwarded group text chain that revealed the coordination behind this manipulation campaign. The messages showed months of family meetings where they planned legal strategies to transfer business assets to offshore accounts before loan defaults, leaving me responsible for debt while they kept profits. Meeting tomorrow at 4 to finalize Cayman Island transfers. Janine's signature buys us 6 more months to move everything. Once assets are offshore, bankruptcy protects us and sticks her with payments. Perfect timing. The text was from Frank to Amanda, Tyler, Linda, and Uncle Pete, time-stamped 3 weeks earlier. Additional messages revealed detailed planning about manipulating my emotions, exploiting my guilt about employee welfare, and using legal threats to force my compliance with renewed financial exploitation. The accidental disclosure transformed my understanding of the situation completely. This wasn't desperate family members making mistakes under pressure. This was criminal conspiracy planned months in advance, designed to steal my financial security while making me feel responsible for protecting them from consequences of their own fraudulent behavior. The next morning, I contacted Sharon Baldwin, a forensic accountant whose reputation for unraveling complex financial fraud had been established through decades of work with law enforcement agencies and bankruptcy courts. Her office in downtown Hartford was filled with case files, computer screens, and charts that mapped financial crimes across multiple jurisdictions. Sharon specialized in cases where family members used trust and emotional manipulation to commit identity theft and credit fraud. Janine, based on your preliminary description, we're looking at potential federal crimes involving identity theft, loan fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. I need to examine every document, bank statement, credit report, and loan agreement connected to your name over the past 5 years. This investigation will take approximately 2 weeks to complete properly. Sharon's methodical approach provided the professional structure I needed to understand my legal position and financial exposure. Her experience with similar cases meant she knew exactly which documents to examine, which patterns to look for, and which legal protections were available to fraud victims. The investigation fee was substantial, but protecting my financial future required professional expertise. I'll also need access to your complete credit history, including any accounts you're unfamiliar with. Identity theft victims often discover unauthorized credit lines, loans, and financial obligations they never knew existed. We need to map your complete financial exposure before developing a legal strategy. The credit report analysis revealed the stunning scope of Frank's fraudulent activities. Over 18 months, he had systematically opened credit accounts using my personal information, social security number, and forged signatures. Multiple business credit lines totaling over $400,000 carried my name as guarantor without my knowledge or consent. Equipment loans, operational credit, and expansion financing all bore fraudulent signatures that passed bank verification systems. Sharon's investigation uncovered business loans for restaurant equipment that was never purchased, construction loans for renovations that never occurred, and operational credit lines that funded personal expenses rather than business costs. Frank had created an elaborate paper trail, making me appear as an active business partner, while ensuring I received no profits control or accurate information about financial operations. Janine, your father has been planning this systematic fraud for over 2 years. These aren't impulsive decisions made under financial pressure. This is premeditated identity theft designed to maximize your financial liability while protecting his personal assets. The documentation shows clear intent to defraud both you and lending institutions. Bank records revealed regular transfers from business accounts to personal accounts in Frank's name, Linda's name, and accounts belonging to Tyler and Amanda. Restaurant profits that should have serviced loan payments were instead funding family vacations, luxury purchases, and personal investments. My credit had financed their lifestyle while they preserved their own financial resources for personal enjoyment. The most damaging discovery was a commercial real estate mortgage in Florida that Frank had secured using my credit rating and forged signatures. The property was a vacation rental business that generated income flowing directly to Frank's personal accounts. I was legally responsible for a $600,000 mortgage on property I had never seen for a business I had no knowledge of generating profits I would never receive. This Florida property represents the most serious element of the fraud because it involves interstate commerce and multiple federal agencies. Bank fraud across state lines carries severe criminal penalties, including potential prison sentences of up to 20 years. Your father has committed crimes that could destroy his life permanently. Sharon's investigation also revealed Frank's sophisticated asset protection strategy that explained the coordinated family manipulation campaign. Legal documents showed systematic transfers of restaurant ownership to offshore corporations. Personal assets moved to international accounts and complex trust structures designed to shield family wealth from creditors and legal judgments. Your family has been working with financial advisors and attorneys to protect their assets while leaving you exposed to debt obligations. The manipulation campaign wasn't desperation. It was designed to buy time for completing asset transfers that would make collection impossible, even if you obtained legal judgments. The offshore account discovery explained Uncle Pete's involvement and his threats about legal action. He wasn't just supporting Frank out of family loyalty. He was actively participating in the asset protection scheme and feared exposure of his own criminal involvement. His attorney consultation hadn't been about protecting Pete from my actions. It had been about protecting Pete from prosecution for conspiracy and money laundering. Pete Romano has been serving as the domestic contact for Cayman Island accounts that now contain over $2 million in transferred restaurant profits and personal assets. His legal threats were projection. He's actually the family member most vulnerable to federal prosecution because money laundering carries mandatory minimum sentences. Sharon's forensic analysis revealed patterns of financial abuse that extended beyond simple loan fraud. Frank had been systematically using my identity to secure credit, then laundering the proceeds through restaurant businesses to offshore accounts controlled by family members. The entire restaurant operation was essentially a money laundering scheme disguised as legitimate family business. The good news for you is that federal victim protection laws provide extensive remedies for identity theft and financial fraud. We can restore your credit rating, eliminate fraudulent debts, and pursue criminal prosecution that will recover stolen assets. The bad news for your family is that these crimes carry severe penalties that will likely result in prison sentences and permanent financial consequences. The investigation culminated in Sharon's recommendation that we immediately contact federal authorities to report the crimes and begin asset recovery proceedings. The scope of fraud exceeded state jurisdiction and required federal prosecution to protect other potential victims and recover stolen funds. Janine, this investigation has revealed one of the most sophisticated family financial fraud schemes I've encountered in 20 years of forensic accounting. Your father didn't just steal money. He created a criminal enterprise using your identity as the foundation for systematic fraud that could have continued indefinitely without your resistance. As Sharon prepared our evidence package for federal investigators, I realized that my decision to remove my name from the loan documents had prevented a much larger fraud that could have destroyed my financial future completely. Frank's manipulation campaign had been designed to secure my continued participation in crimes that would have eventually left me bankrupt while he lived comfortably on stolen profits. The investigation had transformed my family crisis into a criminal case that would change everyone's life permanently. Justice was no longer about personal vindication. It was about preventing future victims and holding criminals accountable for sophisticated financial crimes that threatened the integrity of lending institutions and business regulations. Saturday morning arrived with crisp October air and the kind of bright sunshine that made Connecticut's fall foliage look like something from a travel brochure. The Romano family reunion was scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock at Uncle Pete's sprawling colonial house in West Hartford, complete with catering a live band and decorations celebrating our restaurant empire's expansion to Boston. I wasn't supposed to be there, but my plan required the element of surprise and the presence of witnesses. Sharon Baldwin arrived at my apartment at noon, carrying a briefcase filled with financial evidence, federal documents, and legal papers that would transform the celebration into a criminal exposure event. Marcus Thompson, the attorney I had retained for criminal prosecution, followed in his own car with additional documentation and federal contacts who were coordinating the investigation. Our plan was simple: confront. Frank publicly present evidence of criminal fraud and force acknowledgement of theft in front of family witnesses. The party was already in full swing when we arrived. Children played in the backyard while adults gathered around tables, discussing restaurant business and expansion plans. The scene looked like a Norman Rockwell painting of American family success, complete with proud grandparents, successful children, and prosperity earned through hard work and determination. Nobody suspected they were celebrating a criminal enterprise built on identity theft and federal fraud. I spotted Frank near the barbecue holding court with cousins and neighbors as he described the Boston location's grand opening scheduled for next month. His voice carried the confidence of a successful entrepreneur, sharing wisdom with less fortunate relatives. Tyler stood beside him, nodding agreement and adding details about architectural features and seating capacity. Amanda worked the crowd with her phone, taking photos and creating social media content that portrayed our family as the American dream success story. Frank Romano. I called out loud enough to interrupt conversations across the patio. I'd like to discuss some business documents with you. The patio fell silent as family members turned to stare at my unexpected arrival. Frank's face shifted through surprise, anger, and calculation as he processed my presence and the two professional-looking strangers accompanying me. Linda approached from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron, her expression confused but welcoming. "Janine, sweetheart, what a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you, but there's plenty of food and everyone will be so happy to see you. Who are your friends?" "Mom, these are Sharon Baldwin, forensic accountant, and Marcus Thompson, criminal defense attorney. We're here to discuss Frank's systematic identity theft and federal fraud charges that were filed yesterday afternoon." The silence intensified as family members processed my words and began understanding that this wasn't a reconciliation visit. Frank stepped forward, his face darkening with anger and defensive aggression. Uncle Pete moved closer, his body language suggesting physical intimidation was a possibility. "Janine, you're embarrassing yourself and ruining a family celebration with this paranoid nonsense. Whatever financial misunderstanding we had is between family members, not federal investigators or attorneys. You need to leave immediately before you say something you'll regret permanently." Sharon opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder of documents, her professional demeanor commanding attention from everyone present. Mr. Romano, we have evidence of systematic identity theft, loan fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes spanning 18 months. The Federal Bureau of Investigation opened a criminal case yesterday based on our forensic analysis of fraudulent loan applications, forged signatures, and offshore asset transfers. Marcus stepped forward with federal court documents bearing official seals and signatures. Frank, Romano Tyler, Romano, Amanda Romano, and Peter Romano. You are named defendants in federal criminal charges including conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and racketeering. Asset freezing orders have been issued for all domestic and offshore accounts connected to your fraudulent activities. Uncle Pete's face went pale as he realized his role in the offshore asset protection scheme had been discovered and criminally charged. His legal threats against me had been projection. He was actually facing money laundering charges that carried mandatory minimum sentences under federal guidelines. This is harassment and attempted extortion. Pete protested, his voice lacking the authority he had projected during our phone conversation. We're calling our attorneys immediately to stop this invasion and persecution of innocent family members. Pete, your attorneys have already been notified of the federal charges and asset seizures, Marcus replied calmly. The Cayman Island accounts containing $2.3 million in laundered restaurant profits have been frozen pending criminal prosecution. Your domestic attorney consultation last week was monitored by federal investigators as part of the ongoing criminal investigation. Tyler and Amanda stood frozen, apparently realizing for the first time that their participation in asset transfers and financial manipulation constituted federal crimes with serious penalties. Tyler's graduate school funding and Amanda's wedding expenses had been financed through identity theft, making them accessories to federal fraud charges. Restaurant employees who had been invited to the celebration began understanding that their employment crisis wasn't caused by my stubbornness, but by their employer's criminal activity. Sally Henderson, the single mother who had called me crying, approached with questions about whether her job was actually secure given the criminal charges against management. Mr. Romano, Sally said, her voice carrying hurt and confusion. You told us that Janine was being selfish about family business decisions, but these federal agents are saying you stole her identity to fund our restaurants with fraudulent loans. Were our jobs ever really secure if they were based on stolen money? Tommy Rodriguez, the line cook supporting elderly parents, joined Sally in confronting Frank about the deception they had been told about my role in their employment crisis. You made us call Janine to beg her to save our jobs, but you never told us you were committing crimes that would destroy the business anyway. You used our families as manipulation tools while lying about everything. Frank's entrepreneurial confidence crumbled as employees, family members, and neighbors realized the scope of criminal deception behind Romano's Italian kitchen's success. The federal investigation had revealed that restaurant profits were secondary to identity theft and money laundering operations that used legitimate business as cover for systematic fraud. I built this business from nothing. Frank protested, his voice rising with defensive anger. I created jobs, served good food, and made our family successful through hard work and determination. Every decision I made was for family benefit and business growth. Janine is destroying everything out of jealousy and spite. Frank, you built this business using stolen identity and fraudulent credit. Sharon replied, consulting her forensic analysis. Restaurant profits were immediately transferred to offshore accounts while loan payments were skipped, creating unsustainable debt obligations guaranteed by your daughter's credit rating. This wasn't family business. This was systematic theft disguised as entrepreneurship. Uncle Pete suddenly revealed a recording device he had been carrying, explaining that he had been secretly documenting Frank's conversations about the fraud for months, while planning his own legal action to recover investments that Frank had stolen from him as well. "I've been recording Frank's conversations about using Janine and sticking her with bills since March." Pete announced, his voice carrying bitter satisfaction. He bragged about having the perfect daughter who would never fight back, described her as too trusting and family-focused to recognize financial abuse. "I was planning to blackmail him, but federal prosecution serves justice better than personal revenge." The recordings Pete played for everyone present revealed Frank's true perspective on our relationship and his calculated exploitation of my trust and family loyalty. His words were cruel, dismissive, and completely lacking in paternal love or respect for my sacrificial financial support. "She'll never figure it out because she thinks family means something," Frank's recorded voice said. "Perfect daughters make perfect victims because they blame themselves when family treats them badly. By the time she realizes what happened, we'll have everything offshore and she'll be stuck with payments on money we already spent." The cruelty of Frank's planning and the calculated nature of his exploitation shocked even family members who had participated in manipulating me for renewed financial cooperation. Linda began crying as she realized her husband had systematically abused their daughter's love and trust for financial gain while planning to abandon her with crushing debt obligations. As federal agents arrived to execute arrest warrants for Frank Tyler, Amanda, and Uncle Pete, the family reunion transformed into a crime scene that would forever change our relationships and financial futures. The celebration of expansion built on stolen credit had become accountability for federal crimes that would destroy the criminal enterprise and restore justice to their primary victim. 6 months after the confrontation that ended our family reunion in handcuffs and federal charges, I sat in my new office overlooking Hartford's historic district, watching autumn turn to winter through windows that framed the Connecticut state capitol. Romano Financial Recovery Services occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated brick building, providing consultation services to fraud victims and expertise in asset recovery from complex financial crimes. My experience with family fraud had transformed into professional specialization that helped other victims navigate legal systems and rebuild their financial futures. Frank's criminal trial had concluded the previous month with a plea agreement that sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison for identity theft, loan fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The judge described his case as one of the most sophisticated family financial fraud schemes prosecuted in Connecticut federal court, noting the calculated exploitation of trust and the systematic nature of crimes spanning multiple years and jurisdictions. Asset forfeiture proceedings recovered $4.7 million in stolen funds, laundered profits, and fraudulently obtained property. Tyler and Amanda had accepted plea agreements requiring restitution payments, community service, and supervised probation that would monitor their financial activities for 5 years. Tyler's graduate school suspension became permanent expulsion when university officials learned his tuition had been funded through federal crimes. Amanda's marriage had ended in divorce when her husband realized their wedding had been financed with stolen money, and their financial foundation was built on criminal fraud. Uncle Pete received the harshest sentence among family co-conspirators because money laundering carried mandatory minimums under federal guidelines. His cooperation with prosecutors had reduced his sentence to 4 years, but his assets were completely forfeited, and his professional certifications were permanently revoked. The recordings that exposed Frank's planning had also documented Pete's active participation in asset concealment and criminal conspiracy. Linda had divorced Frank within weeks of his arrest, her attorneys arguing successfully that she had been deceived about the source of family income and unaware of criminal activities. Her settlement included the family home and half of legitimately obtained assets, though most family wealth had been subject to federal forfeiture. She had attended counseling to address her enabling behaviors and sent me a letter accepting responsibility for her role in facilitating Frank's exploitation of my trust and financial generosity. The restaurant cooperative formed by employee ownership had become a remarkable success story, demonstrating that honest business management could thrive without criminal financing. Sally Henderson had emerged as general manager, coordinating operations across all locations with efficiency that surprised former customers and vendors. Tommy Rodriguez had advanced to head chef, developing new menu items that honored traditional recipes while establishing the cooperative's independent identity. Romano's Italian Kitchen had been renamed Hartford Community Kitchen to reflect employee ownership and community support that sustained the business through transition from criminal enterprise to legitimate cooperative. Sales had increased 28% since the ownership change, as local media coverage and community pride generated customer loyalty that Frank's deceptive management had never achieved. The Boston location had been sold to pay restitution, but the 3 Connecticut locations provided stable employment for 41 workers with profit-sharing benefits and healthcare coverage. My consulting practice specialized in helping fraud victims understand legal options, recover stolen assets, and rebuild financial security after family financial crimes. The Federal Trade Commission had contracted my services to develop educational materials about family fraud recognition and prevention. University business schools invited me to speak about financial boundaries and trust abuse in family enterprises. Legal conferences featured my presentations about forensic accounting in identity theft cases. The most rewarding aspect of my new career was counseling other victims who had experienced exploitation similar to my family situation. Adult children whose parents had destroyed their credit for gambling or business failures. Siblings whose family members had used their identities for drug-related financial crimes. Spouses whose partners had committed systematic financial abuse disguised as family financial planning. Each consultation reminded me how common family financial fraud had become and how desperately victims needed professional support to recover their lives. Marcus Thompson had become more than my attorney during the prosecution phase. Our professional relationship had developed into personal friendship based on mutual respect and shared values about justice and integrity. Our courtship was built on honest communication and clear boundaries. Qualities my family experience had taught me to value above romantic excitement or emotional manipulation. Marcus understood my commitment to helping fraud victims because his own legal practice focused on protecting vulnerable people from exploitation. 6 months after Frank's sentencing, Marcus and I were engaged to marry in a small ceremony that would celebrate partnership based on equality and mutual support, rather than financial dependency or family obligation. Our relationship discussions included detailed conversations about financial independence, career goals, and family planning that prioritized honest communication over romantic idealization. The contrast with my family's deceptive relationships was profound and healing. Linda had begun visiting my office monthly for counseling sessions that addressed her enabling behaviors and helped her develop healthier relationship patterns. Our conversations were difficult, but necessary for rebuilding trust and establishing boundaries that protected both of us from future manipulation. Linda's therapy had helped her recognize how her emotional manipulation had facilitated Frank's financial crimes and damaged our mother-daughter relationship. Janine. I spent 28 years married to a man I thought I knew, supporting behaviors I didn't understand were criminal, Linda said, during one particularly emotional session. I trained you to sacrifice your financial security for family approval because that's how I survived my marriage. I'm sorry for teaching you to accept exploitation as love. Tyler and Amanda had both requested family counseling sessions to address their roles in the financial manipulation and explore possibilities for rebuilding relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. These conversations were challenging because they required acknowledging years of entitled behavior and accepting responsibility for criminal participation that had damaged my financial security and emotional well-being. I never thought about how our financial requests affected your life, Tyler admitted during a joint counseling session. You were just the successful sister who had money to solve our problems. I didn't consider that you had your own goals and needs that suffered when you constantly rescued the rest of us from consequences of our bad decisions. Amanda's counseling focused on her manipulation skills and how she had learned to exploit family relationships for personal benefit. Her therapy revealed patterns of narcissistic behavior that prioritized her needs above others' well-being, including her willingness to manipulate my emotions about her children to secure financial support for her lifestyle choices. I turned my children into weapons against you, making you feel responsible for their welfare, while I spent money on personal luxuries, Amanda acknowledged. I was teaching them that manipulation was how families worked and that successful relatives owed financial support to less responsible family members. The employee-owned restaurants had asked me to serve on their board of directors, providing business consultation while maintaining my independence from operational management. This role allowed me to support honest business practices while ensuring the cooperative's success honored the legitimate work of employees who had been deceived about their employer's criminal activities. Board meetings were collaborative and transparent, everything that Frank's management had never been. Community support for the restaurant cooperative had generated local media attention and business school case studies about employee ownership transition from criminal enterprises to legitimate businesses. The cooperative's success demonstrated that honest management could build sustainable prosperity without exploitation or deception. Local banks had provided favorable financing for expansion plans based on transparent financial reporting and ethical business practices. Sharon Baldwin had become a close friend and professional mentor, teaching me advanced forensic accounting techniques, while we collaborated on cases involving complex family financial crimes. Her expertise in criminal financial patterns had expanded my consulting capabilities and established credibility with law enforcement agencies that regularly requested our services in fraud investigations. Federal legislation addressing family financial fraud had been introduced in Congress partly based on our case and the growing recognition that existing identity theft laws needed stronger penalties for crimes committed within family relationships. Testimony I provided to congressional committees emphasized how emotional manipulation made family fraud particularly destructive and difficult for victims to recognize before devastating financial damage occurred. My apartment had been replaced by a colonial house in West Hartford's historic district, purchased with recovered assets from federal forfeiture proceedings and income from my expanding consulting practice. The house represented financial security, built on my own professional success rather than family manipulation or dependency on others' support. Every mortgage payment and utility bill reflected genuine independence and self-sufficiency. Sunday afternoons found me volunteering at Hartford Community Center, teaching financial literacy classes for families affected by financial crimes. Students included fraud victims, recently divorced women, establishing independent finances, and young adults learning to recognize exploitation in family and romantic relationships. Teaching others provided ongoing healing from my own family experience while preventing future victims. The life lesson that emerged from confronting family financial fraud was deeper than simple boundaries or self-protection. True family loyalty required honesty, mutual respect, and reciprocal support rather than exploitation disguised as love. Financial boundaries protected relationships by preventing resentment and enabling genuine affection based on choice rather than obligation. Justice served healing when pursued with wisdom and purpose, rather than revenge or punishment. My family's criminal behavior had inadvertently provided the catalyst for building a life based on authentic values and honest relationships. Frank's exploitation had forced me to develop strength I didn't know I possessed and establish standards I had never enforced. The painful process of criminal prosecution had revealed the difference between family members who loved me and those who valued only my financial utility. Looking back, I realized that Frank's text message banning me from the family reunion had actually been a liberation notice, though he never intended it as such. Being excluded from celebrating success I had financed forced me to recognize exploitation I had been trained to ignore. Sometimes the cruelest family actions accidentally provide the greatest gifts by forcing victims to value themselves enough to demand better treatment. As I prepared for my wedding to Marcus and continued building Romano Financial Recovery Services, I understood that healing from family financial fraud required replacing exploitation with partnership dependency, with independence, and manipulation with honest communication. The perfect daughter had finally learned that perfection meant protecting herself from those who would abuse her generosity while building relationships with people who valued her well-being as much as their own. Have you ever experienced a situation where family loyalty was used to manipulate your generosity or financial support? Family relationships can be complicated when money becomes involved, and sometimes setting boundaries is the only way to protect both yourself and the people you love. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how you've handled difficult family dynamics involving financial expectations. If this story resonated with you or helped you think differently about family financial boundaries, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about overcoming manipulation and building healthy relationships. Sharing these experiences helps other people recognize similar patterns in their own lives and gives them courage to prioritize their own well-being. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting content that explores these challenging but important family dynamics. I hope sharing this experience helps you trust your instincts about financial exploitation. And remember that true family love never requires you to sacrifice your security or self-respect. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.